Hey world, what's going on? This is your host Nate, and we
We
got
live, baby.
G Oliver.
What
Uh,
up? What up? What up?
we're a little late today, but better late than never. And we actually are live today. What's been going on, Mr. George?
Nothing much, y'all. Welcome to episode 2 of Binge Worthy Podcast.
There we
And
go.
today we talking reboot or the
Reboots.
boot. Give it the boot. Give it the boot. So Nate and I, it's gonna be an interesting show. I think this is one topic where we squarely sit on opposite sides of the spectrum on this one.
I
But
mean,
we're
not
gonna
totally, but for the most part, yeah.
I think this conversation is gonna divulge that we're pretty far apart on this one. I don't know. I could be wrong. I could be wrong. But
Maybe a
we're gonna talk
little.
about remakes, reboots, reimaginings. Is it a healthy homage to what came before it, or is it just ill creative hacking? Is it just
That's where
those
I
who have
fall.
no have no original creative bone in their body is just taking whatever they can and repackaging it in order to make money.
And
Um,
that's basically what my opinion is.
and that's what Nate's opinion is. Um, I appreciate a good remake, reboot, reimagining. They are not all the same. Some are far better than others. But on the whole, on the more, I think I appreciate them and I understand the need. So we're going to talk about it a little bit today. We're going to talk about it. We're going to frame it around two original works, which I'm actually really excited about talking about because they both exist in a genre that I appreciate very well. So I think it's a good place to start
Right.
the conversation.
What I'll say is I am after doing 2 seasons of this show, and for me, I'll say going into this podcast in general, I am not a big TV watcher.
Okay.
And I rarely go to movies. So for me, I read. So the idea of a remake to me, it has to be done properly, and you've discovered that throughout this, there are remakes that I appreciate, but it has to be done in a proper form and fashion, not just because we want a new, fresh body in this role and we want to
Hmm.
make more money out of it. So we're going
Yeah.
to start with those images. Uh,
Reboot or give the boot. And Nate is like, give them all the boot. You could do without all of them.
well, you'll see in this, maybe
I
not.
like taking the story and putting a fresh face to it. You know,
Right.
I understand because I understand. And Nate, I think this is where we ultimately diverge. I think you are an artist,
Mm-hmm.
respectfully, and I understand that, and I'm firmly, like I appreciate the business side of it. I do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I understand why like even outside of just strictly profit, like I understand that there are other factors that go into play when you take something that was even mildly popular at one point, uh, throw some timely relevant faces on it, and create something fairly new,
Right. And
like
and
this
and then,
Bodyguard remake that everybody keep talking about.
so yeah, I'm not doing that.
And
I'm
I
not.
mean, I love Whitney as much as everybody else.
But to
But
to
I understand from a business perspective, you know what I mean? Like I think that if it's a good enough film to remake with current actors and actresses or current stars. Because I mean, I think it's a decent story
hmm
that asking people 20, 30 years removed from something to, oh, just watch the original. I mean, I think that works for some. I don't think that's something that really works for the masses. And as
right.
much as I would like them to see things my way and say to, say, a 15 or 16-year old, like, hey, you should really check out this movie, The Bodyguard, And I'm like, it's got Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner, and they're like, who? And I kind of get the reluctance around that. I
And
do.
it's and all that's fine for me. And it goes a little bit beyond just the business of what we do. Sorry, I'm right across from Penn Station, so y'all go hear train horn in a few seconds. But
Okay.
it goes beyond that for me, and it's more a cultural thing for me. And I understand how younger people be like, who is that? But just like you and I both appreciate black and white movies or movies that are far
Mhm.
beyond our age, we have to begin to push our young people in that direction so they learn appreciation for what has already been instead of just taking the idea from something and remaking it. And
Mhm.
that's the part for me culturally. Go ahead and go on this list is a lot of white people movies. Go remake them. But the stuff that
Mhm.
has been true and tried and successful in our culture, let's
Mhm.
let's stack on that better ideas and more relevant ideas, not just oh Whitney not here no more. Let me put so and so in that role and she'll rock it out. Like let's go beyond that and not damage the image of what we've built already and build on it so Hollywood has no excuse not to make new projects from us instead of them going into the vote and say, well, instead of you doing this good new idea, let's go back and take this because Whitney's not here no more and do that. As much of a Whitney Houston fan as I am, I'm one of
Mhm.
those people where she did a remake of Cinderella, loved it, but she did also did a remake of Sparkle, hated it. From and that's just my personal opinion, not grading whether it's good or not. But that's my argument in it. We are so quick culturally to replace each other. Culturally, I'm just speaking about us as black people, that it we have to almost force the hand of our young people to learn to appreciate history and culture and what they're standing on top of. Your creativity, you're free to be creative because of the work of Ozzie Davis and so on and so forth, Ruby Glover and all those individuals that have gone before us. That's how you have the freedom to be creative. So let's not replace them. Let's build on top of what they've created. So let me
Mhm.
hear a fresh new idea, and,
Yeah.
and that's my standpoint. So I
Okay.
don't just
So
hate the past, but
I think it's bigger than any one culture. Like
right,
I think that argument would be a lot easier for me to swallow if it was just say black films or films that live in the black
right,
cultural lexicon that were being remade. But this is an industry wide issue that touches, I think,
and I
every
say
race, every culture.
right, and I
Um,
say go ahead and go remake those white people movies. Go ahead, kill yourself.
just
Go
don't
do
remake
it.
no black ones, is what you're
Don't
saying.
do it. Don't do it
So
unless you
so
do it
we
correctly.
can't get a new theatrical release of The Color Purple.
For what? We have a book, we have the stage
Uh huh.
play, and we have a movie. What else do you have? What new idea can you take and put into a story that's already been told? Like what how you gonna do that?
I don't
With
know.
an industry and a generation that is void of imagination. Why even touch it?
Are we really void of imagination?
We are. Have you and you work in the school system, so you see these
Mm-hmm.
children decreasing. I'm not saying it's at zero, but it's very
Mm-hmm.
close to it. Very
I,
close to it.
I don't know if I could agree with that. I
I
what I will say is this: I'm not a fan of their imaginative, creative work, and mostly I'm talking now about the music. But to say they're completely devoid of
no, I didn't
imagination,
say completely, but they're
mm-hmm.
very close to it. And we see their imagination being put in their laps. And it's not coming from them being able to take some blocks and make a building out of it or make something out of it. That's those days are going fast. And I hope they don't leave us. But how does your children play with Legos?
Man, I got so many Legos in this house. I really want to get rid of some of them.
That's every
Got
parent.
trash bags worth of Legos in here.
I think that's every parent
Um,
that we've ever talked to.
Yeah, man, because my son said something to me the other day. Like he stepped on a Lego and he was like, "That didn't." Hurt. I was like, "That didn't hurt," and he was like, "Nah, it isn't really that bad. You get used to it after a while." And like, okay, so and like that's kind of to my point is that like it is an age thing, and it does matter, right?
Hmm.
Like I step on a Lego and it's like death, yo. Like every time I step on a
Yeah,
Lego, I consider bagging up every Lego in this house and like taking it either. I
at
don't
that
even want to take
moment.
it somewhere to donate it. I want to take it to like the city dump. That's how I feel when I step on a Lego. He steps on Legos and it's fine.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of indicative of the differences that really do need to be respected around just the idea of like our youth are going to be wildly different from us as much as they are the same.
Yeah.
And sometimes in feeding that, we can't just feed them what worked for us. We can surely expose them to it and hope that they would, in time, gain an appreciation, which is what
Hmm.
I think happened with me and you, right? Like,
Right.
I can go back and watch a black and white film. You can go back and watch a black and white film. You can go and watch like original works from a Ruby D or
Hmm.
um, a Sidney Poitier,
Yeah.
which I can as well. But that's because I have very, very vivid and fond memories of those things being on kind of in the background of my childhood. Because to sit and say that I was actually paying attention to them as a child, but because that background noise made a difference. As I got older and more into film, I found that those movies weren't difficult to watch.
But
Um,
you have a basis for it because you were
and I
exposed
have a
to it.
basis. And some people just never got that basis.
Right.
And I have to respect that. I try not to craft the totality of my worldview just on what works for me. I understand that I've been privileged in certain ways. I've had access to certain things that other people
Hmm.
haven't, and then vice versa, right? Like other people have had experiences and things that I never got as a youth,
Right.
and that informs that. But I try not to let
But you
that.
see the difference in that though, and it's not so much to give your or force down your children's throat what you've gotten or the children that we are
Mm,
exposed to. But you know, like I know, we had privileges in education and where we got to travel as children that many of our counterparts did not get. And exposure is everything to a child. So a lot of I know for me, and we've shared similar experiences,
mm-hmm.
we've been able to do things that other people haven't, and that made a difference in our outlook on things. And it
Absolutely.
really makes a difference when you get out of that 4 block radius of your neighborhood. In terms of culture, in terms of worldview, in terms of education, it makes a difference. And I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that I like everything my mother liked. But when we were growing up, it was okay for us to also enjoy the music of our mothers and fathers while we were also listening to this thing called the hip hop. Like, well, I said it like I was really old, but but we were also able to listen to things that we liked, and our parents didn't like it, but it was cool for us to listen to the Luther Vandross and Anita Bakers, and it was cool. The music was
I
good.
mean, we didn't really have a choice though.
I mean,
Like
but we didn't. But
we
we
didn't
still.
like. I'm gonna be honest. Like a lot of. I look at like my musical selection now, and I realize how much it really is influenced by my parents.
Yeah,
Um, but again, I
and that
think
wasn't a
that's
bad
just.
thing.
I no. I'm not saying that. I'm. It's not. It's not about bad or good. I think it's a totally good thing.
Hmm.
Uh, but to sit there and say that I was like rocking off to some Luther Vandross
You
or
was
some
on a
Whitney
sneak
Houston at
tip.
10,
You
I
was.
probably wasn't. I mean, I don't think I was. I think it was just something that like I didn't have no control over what was being played. And so I had no choice. So like,
Right.
like I didn't have a choice. Those things were in the background of my childhood. And because of that, I think that informed my appreciation for that music um, as I got older. Um,
Hmm. But that only added to who you were. It
but
didn't
then what
take
do we
away from
do?
anything.
No, it didn't. It didn't take away from anything. As a matter of fact, it had intrinsic value.
Right.
Um, but then what do we do? So the question I think becomes like, what do we do with those who didn't have that experience, right? And as much as I'm not gonna listen to it, but I don't know if like Tory Lanez wants to remake a Luther Vandross album, have at it. You know what I mean? Like, go right ahead.
But it's
Because
one
somebody
thing.
out
It's
there,
one. But remakes have always been done in music and the arts. Stuff is always, but it's a way that you do it where you pay homage. It's a song that
hmm
I just listened to. One of my favorite jazz singers is Nancy Williams, and she has a song called "Guess Who I Saw Today," and I remember hearing I cannot Shantae Moore do a rendition of it, and it was done in the style of a Nancy Wilson. It wasn't like I'm gonna get rid of Nancy Wilson to do this song. Whitney Houston with Shaka Khan's song "I'm Every Woman," like it happens in a lot of, and especially in the music industry. But it's a way you do it, and that's
but
important
like
to me.
to be fair, Whitney kind of got rid of them.
Yeah, but there are
She
people.
kind of got rid of them with her version though.
Yeah, but there's still
Like,
people
it was
who,
completely like, I'm putting my stamp on this,
to
and
us
like when
though,
people think of this song, they gonna think of me.
and from our generation, where our
I will
parents,
always love you,
Dolly
which was
Parton.
right biggest song off the
But it's a way
the
that you
soundtrack
it's
to
a
the
way
Bodyguard.
that you do it. Like if you look at the quality of it, especially
hmm
when she was, I'll think of more like the ones where they were paying homage to a certain artist. Like she brought Shaka Khan into the music video of "I'm Every Woman." That's paying a little homage. We have a bad
hmm
history of redoing something and totally dismissing who had did it before. We got a great musical, Dreamgirls. When they went to make the movie, they didn't think about the original three women who had made it what it was, for and made it possible for them to even be able to, who helped create it.
But
Even
isn't that something that happens like quite often?
it is, and it's
I
sad to
mean,
me.
like when
That's
you
why
think
I'm
about when
so.
you think about works that make the transition from the stage to film, it's
But
it's
that's
not
an
often
unfortunate
that those,
decision.
huh?
That's an unfortunate decision, though. And I'm not saying they had to be in a movie, but the women of that, except for Loretta Devine, was the only one that was included in it. But even she has said they asked her nothing. Like they didn't interview her when they went to go rewrite the script. Nothing. Like there was
hmm
no like, hey, how are you doing? Let's bring them on the set for the day. Like that's for me. And I feel like we're at that place with our history. We want to remake our history. We want to rewrite history. And that's culturally an issue that I see. I would not have a problem with remakes because there are some that I actually enjoy. We've reviewed a couple of them on here, but for me
hmm
it's how we have done our remakes and how we've let white Hollywood depict to us what is good for us to do and what we should not think about doing. Meaning a
Well,
lot of
what it
really good scripts have not been shown, or now that we have streaming networks, a lot of those pieces are being brought to those platforms that could have been brought to film, TV, or stage if
hmm
we have fought harder to have our stories told from every perspective, not
I
just the
don't
first
know if it's
original.
so much about fighting hard. I think that when you bring a film, when you create a film, it's a hefty investment, and I
Hmm.
think that it's not. I think that unfortunately, I think that people like us who appreciate certain things, regardless of how old they are
Hmm.
actually in a minority, and that's the reason why we see remakes and rehashes and reimaginings the way that we do, as opposed to original works, because I think that when it comes to original works, we're in the minority. And
Well,
unfortunately, like it costs so much money usually to make a film. I mean, even a small independent film like the two that we're going to discuss tonight were are relatively they were produced on for film, very conservative budgets, right? And
but
one
that's
of
an
them was
excuse
a was
now. That's something
well,
that could have
that's
been.
not an excuse. I
It
don't
is.
know if I would call that an
It's
excuse.
an excuse. I mean,
That's a real
because
life
we
reality.
see in non-black films and television shows new
Mhm.
concepts every season. A new, fresh concept. There's still some remakes or reboots of things, but we see
But
fresh
television is a
concepts.
different industry, though.
Across the board for me, though. We see, but
Television
across the
is a
board.
different industry.
But I'm saying
Even
across the
music,
board,
even music,
television,
like
film, but we see new concepts across the board from other cultures. And us, we keep hearing, no, this isn't good, or no, we're not doing this, or they don't
Yeah, man. When you
greenlight a
say
lot of our
when we
new
see,
projects.
where are you seeing like all of this like in film? Where are you seeing like, let's say, okay, so since you're talking cultural, like
Hmm.
where are you seeing all of these original ideas popping up like on the white side? I mean, the biggest like in one of the biggest movies in recent history, right? On in white culture was the most recent rendition of A Star Is Born, which I think has been remade like 5 or 6 times. Like they
Yeah,
remake it every generation.
and again,
Like they seem to remake that
that's
film
one of
every
the examples
generation.
that for a movie like that or a film like that, that's one of the times where I think a reimagining or adaptation of what something. I don't have a problem with a remake or adaptation. I don't have an issue with it. But culturally, I'm speaking from within our own culture. We keep doing the same work, and
When do our
we'll
cultural
take
films
something
even
that's
like
out
when
there.
do
It's the whole string of '90s movies, the black love movies. It's the
hmm
same type of concept, but we're just putting new faces in it. Or we do this thing where we'll erase something that already is, and it's not typically our idea to do it. But like you said, the people who actually own that work, they'll put a new, fresh black face in it. And I'm not speaking. I can't speak for any other culture. I am saying
hmm
for our work. Let's start pushing. We have too many
but
platforms out
when do
here right
we get
now.
remakes though?
You said,
You're
when
saying
do
that
we
the
do
night you're
remakes?
not talking about remakes in the example that you just used. You talking about that 90s period where we got
Well,
several
that's a remake. That's
several
an adaptation.
successful.
That's considered under one of the adaptations,
I
or
mean,
not necessarily a remake.
I'm not gonna call Love and Basketball an adaptation of Love Jones. I think they're two very completely different films, marketed
Mm,
to two completely different demographics
I
within
don't. I
Black
think
culture. I
conceptually
think
wise,
the only similarities between those films is that they're both romance. They were both romance films.
okay. Well, what
But
about
I
the rest
mean,
of
when
them?
you what about what?
What about the rest of the remakes and
Well, that's what I'm
reimagining?
asking because I'm trying to think of like what remakes have we seen of our films, right? Like, okay, our films are like, from that period, we're talking about
Hmm.
Love Jones, we're talking about Love and Basketball, we're talking
Hmm.
about Jason's Lyric, we're talking about, um, like there's a plethora of those films
Right.
in across that time period, but the only similarity in them, Waiting to Exhale,
My
all of these
my
movies were about the
argument
relationships between black men and women.
my argument is coming from a perspective of right now, and I'm
Okay,
starting
so
to
what
see a
about right
lot.
now?
But a lot of things, like there's a whole list of new movies. A couple of them, I believe, is on this list. But there are a couple of things that we've already done that they're going to remake again, and they're
Like
not
what
even
outside the
more than
Bodyguard?
like 2025. The Bodyguard, Waiting to Exhale. What was the
So
other
Waiting to
one?
Exhale is coming to TV, I think.
Yeah, that was supposed to be. I think that's being held up right now. I don't think they're actively doing it.
Okay.
Um, I spoke about the Miss Pat show. That's something else that we're going to bring to this table. Being a I don't want to say a reimagine, but more of adaptation of TV shows with a black heavyset mom in it, like those types of films. And it's not like hundreds and thousands of them, but
hmm
I don't like remakes. I just don't like it. I
So
don't
you don't
like
like any. So what you're saying is that
because
you
they're
don't
not
like
done with
any.
the same respect level as the original one was. So they normally take a lot of the qualities out of it and just make it salacious. So I'm quite sure the person that they picked to replace Whitney Houston and the Bodyguard is going to just be the next hot thing. And of course Whitney was hot at the time, but she was perfect for the role. Is very little thought in my opinion about the quality of the work as it is the popularity of it. And we know popularity is waning. It is here one day and gone the next. But a quality piece of work, it lasts a long time.
Yeah, but a quality piece of work, we won't know that until we see the film. And like remakes,
Ugh,
particularly, are
I don't trust it.
they're about 50-50. Like we got some we got some really really bad ones, and we got some really really good ones. And first of all, look,
Uh,
while I understand that we all love Whitney Houston from our cultural perspective, The Bodyguard ain't no black film. Like it wasn't made by black people, written by black people,
it's
produced by
it's
black
not it's
people.
not,
It
but
is like
for me, it's not. That's it's the idea of just erasing that. Whether you could just think of
but you're
another
not
concept to
erasing it.
put
How many
that
people
in.
are gonna eat? How
The
many
same thing they
people who
about to
may
do
not?
with. So the preacher's wife is about to be reimagined into a
Mhm.
darker version of itself
Okay,
with the same man who co-starred with Whitney Houston.
with Courtney Vance, right?
Right, and Angela Bassett is going to direct and produce it. So
Okay,
to
what's wrong with
me,
that?
it why can't you just do another piece? Just do something totally different.
But
Like
I
they're
mean,
about
like,
to do the same thing with, and there are times where the concept works for me, and it's times where it was like, this let good enough be. So the Fresh Prince of Bel Air is about to do the same thing. They're
right.
about to do that, but it's going to be a darker version. Now, how Will Smith explained it, that was the downfall of the original run of the show because they tried to get dark in certain moments. And they saw how the ratings began to dip in those last two seasons when they tried to
Mm-hmm.
do things like that. So creating a Fresh Prince of Bel Air where it's a darker tone to it originally, that's putting a different perspective on it versus just remaking something for the sake of remaking it. And some of the original cast members are included in telling the story. For me,
Mm-hmm.
it's just the integrity for me. And if it's not done with good integrity, I don't typically like something. And
So
not
you
because of
think
that, but it's never
so?
really as good. And you could have did without it. That budget could have been put in the place of a work that to a playwright or a screenwriter that
Mm-hmm.
actually had a good piece of work that you just threw off the table because you didn't think it was going to be profitable. But
Well, I for one will say that the only remakes I dislike are the ones that offer nothing new. I
yeah,
think a darker, more serious toned. Um, when I think about The Preacher's Wife, which itself was a remake, um,
right.
at least the black version was a remake.
And it still was
Um,
a different. It was still a different story though. They
exactly,
still told a
it was a
different
different
story.
story. It had a different spin on it, and I think a more serious tone version of that film.
Right.
That film tackled some, as I remember it, that film tackled some pretty hefty elements in a very lighthearted way.
hmm
So if
And
you're telling me that you're doing a quote unquote darker version, it just tells me that there's certain themes that
right,
instead of
you're gonna
attacking
pull
it from
out.
a lighthearted way are going to be addressed
Right,
in a
so it's no
little bit
longer gonna
more
be
of
a
a serious.
comedy.
And so it's not going to be a comedy.
hmm
And I don't have no problem with that. I just
And
don't.
that's
I don't
and
think that
actually
lacks. I
the
don't think there's any lacking of integrity in that idea.
and some say something like the Bodyguard. So they're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about remaking it. Then we could get to the list. So we don't because we already a half an hour in. But dealing with the Bodyguard. So that was a remake of another movie, an older movie. So originally the original remake was supposed to be Diana Ross and Ryan O'Neal. And their
Mm-hmm.
issue with that script, which that would have been interesting, but the magic that was the Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner was that
Mm-hmm.
the soundtrack went along with it, and we both know Diana Ross don't sound like Whitney Houston, so
So the business decision.
it was a business decision. So I don't have a I value them looking at it and saying, "Hey, this isn't going to work," versus just saying, "Well, it worked with Whitney. Let's just put another person in place of her." So it's like you said, when there's no nuance, when there's no new, fresh perspective, when it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't tell a different story, it's for naught. And then there
Right.
are other remakes that
Well,
happen, like The
I
Color
agree with
Purple.
you wholeheartedly on that. I just think that
hmm
we can't say that until we actually see the film. Like
no.
Courtney Vance and his wife made an announcement
Yeah,
about the fact that they were going to remake it, and they told us specifically like the angle that they were going for. Every remake don't do that. It's not until
yeah,
you see the film that you or you at least start to see the trailer or news starts to break once filming has started, that
I
you
and
start to really get an idea
I,
of
I have to say
the
I love
difference.
Angela Bassett, but I'm on the fence about her directing. So yeah.
Why is that?
We'll watch the movie. We'll watch a movie she directed, and we can
I
build
wasn't
our
even
opinion
aware.
on it.
You know what? Then I see where your uncomfortability comes from. I don't think I was aware that Angela Bassett had directed any films
She
either.
directed one of the Whitney Houston movies.
Like the E movies.
Yeah, the one with
Oh
Yaya
no, I
as
don't,
Whitney
I don't, I
Houston.
don't, I don't really pay much attention to any of
See,
those.
exactly.
But that has nothing to do with them being remakes. It's when something is on E or Lifetime, I'm immediately like, like to me, to me that signals low quality, and I'm just like, nah, I don't want to do that.
Exactly. So
You know
we're
what I
gonna
mean? Like
go through. So George has, based off an article he read, we're gonna go through a number of these remakes. I don't know if they're still in the same order, so uh, I was trying to pull up the list that you gave it so we can at least announce it. Uh, but this first one is I Dream a Genie.
okay,
So do we reboot this or give it the boot?
I Dream of Genie.
I Dream a
You know,
Genie.
that's not one of the shows that I really was into. It was not in the
Mhm.
background of my childhood. So I'm gonna say reboot it.
I was kind of and for me
Especially if you're gonna reboot it with a black cast. I'd like to see that.
and sometimes that doesn't work, but
Yeah, Death
because
at
I
a
don't want this.
Funeral.
It was a comedy when it came out, but sometimes when we change the race of what it can sometimes be off. Because what was one of the movies that did that?
Death at a
Uh,
Funeral.
Death in a Funeral, but it was another one. Not Bridges of Madison County, but it had Felicia Rashad, Queen Latifah, Jill Scott. Um, yeah, and it was the same story, but they just made
It
it a
don't
black
hit. It
cast.
don't hit. Right.
Yeah,
And I
so
think it has to be more. Like you can't. So we can talk about that later. But that's one of my issues with remakes and reboots is that you can't just change the people and the characters. Like there needs to be an actual like reason why this story is being retold. And when that doesn't happen, I think those reboots and remakes fall on the trashy side. Like you could have just gave that the boot.
not trashy side.
Yeah, the trashy side. All right, I'm going with reboot for I Dream of Genie.
And I'm gonna stay with mine. Go ahead and reboot all those white people shows. Reboot it.
All right,
Next, is
give it the boot.
give it a boot.
I say give it the boot because first of all, this is not a
Conan,
good film. Conan is not a good film.
Conan the Barbarian.
It was the perfect role for Arnold, and I just
Right,
don't see. I don't really see anyone kind of embodying that character, and like he is what made that movie interesting, in my opinion.
right.
But okay, because there was that great villainous turn by James Earl Jones, also, right? But
Mm.
theoretically, like as a concept, I just don't think Conan is really that interesting, especially in the modern day. Um, I'm not saying it couldn't done, but you know they did reboot this.
And I'm sure they did. 'Cause I can only imagine
They rebooted this with Jason Momoa about 10 years ago, and it was a dud. It was terrible. It was
it
bad.
was terrible. So give
Yeah,
it the boot.
it was very bad. So I don't want to see them
Next.
try that again. Definitely remake the Jetsons.
This
I
was
heard
one
that
of the
they're gonna
cartoons that
do
I
this.
never
I heard
really.
that there's a live action Jetsons coming. I would like to see that.
Okay.
I
Well,
would
like,
like to see that.
this was one of the cartoons I probably watched it a couple times, but to me, Saturday mornings was sleep-in time, so I never really watched it a lot. But
Oh man, the Jetsons was that.
so I'm
Yeah, I
gonna
would
have
like
to
to
go
see a
and watch
live
it.
action version of the Jetsons. I mean, they did a live action version of the Flintstones, which I thought was really good.
I mean, with Bezos going into space so much, I guess it would make sense to reboot it now. So I guess rebooted. I've never really
Hmm.
watched it. So next,
What is this?
um,
I'm
is this the
unfamiliar with
same
this, but
show?
I actually read up on this,
This is
and
Jody from
rebooted. Yeah,
Comedy
I mean not
Central.
even reboot because this a spinoff, right? Like
Yeah,
she's
this
supposed to
was
be
a
getting her
spinoff.
own show. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Reboot that. I
Yeah,
don't know anything
I
about
watched
that
it a
show. I didn't
couple. It
watch
was
that
on
show.
Comedy Central. I remember
Yeah, I didn't.
watching it. I think it was Daria or
Hmm.
something like that. That was where this spun off from, and she was the black character, so they just made her own black cartoon. But I
Right. Yeah.
remember it being on
I'm
Comedy
always
Central.
I'm always for that.
Right. Next, Rugrats.
No, give it the
This
boot.
looks
And they
really,
look really, really weird and scary and like, yeah,
yeah,
nothing about that looks good. And the
no.
Rugrats is one of those classics that it's like, yo, if you're not if you're not willing to go back and watch the Rugrats, like the original Rugrats, then you just don't
Hmm.
deserve the pleasure. Like, you know, you just
Now,
don't.
two different issues when it comes to cartoons. A lot of them would be problematic today. So for me, I'll always say if and most times you'll find something problematic in a cartoon from like the 90s on back. So
Yeah.
I would say reboot it
Okay.
because they're going to just update and make it more relevant today anyway and less.
And I can get with that, but don't reboot this if it's gonna look like this screenshot
Yeah,
right here, because that's just scary.
and that and that's sometimes your argument where you say things didn't kind of age well, but for me,
Hmm.
where we were with quality in terms of filming and even animation and stuff like that. Sometimes that stuff is nostalgic, and I like it the way it is. I don't because this
Hmm.
is what it normally looks like when they try to update it, which looks very scary.
Yeah,
Somebody's child gonna be scared of this.
yeah, I'm not with that.
So
I don't
he
need
says
that one.
don't reboot it. So I don't even know what the hell this is. Some of these things on this list was like, what is this?
Yeah, go to the next one. I just sent
This was
I
Gossip
sent the list
Girls.
as a see I didn't
Yeah, this
I don't
wasn't
think
my
I watched
speed.
the original Gossip Girl,
Uh-uh.
but I think they already rebooted this on HBO
This
Max.
looks well. This I believe this is the reboot that we're looking at now.
Oh, okay. So I didn't watch the original Gossip Girls. I
Right.
haven't seen the one on HBO Max. I do have a few people that watched both. And this is one of those ones that had a very relevant spin on it as a reboot, right?
Right.
Um, in that this time around, they put the focus, which they didn't have to change, because
Mm-hmm.
Gossip Girl is apparently about a bunch of rich kids. It was like the television version of Cruel Intentions, as I understand it. So um, this is really more like the way someone explained it to me. It has a really interesting critique on social media and how it affects kids, which
And which
is a
would be
timely
interesting.
conversation. So I
And
think that that's
interesting,
something that
right? And I think it's an interesting spin because when the original one came out, social media wasn't what it is today.
no, no,
So
and not at all.
so
So
with
like
things
when you
like
have
that, I get
something
it.
new to say, or
Right.
when you have a new aspect to address,
Right.
yeah,
Because my example for a reboot of something that went horribly wrong was Roseanne. So sometimes when you try to update something, it doesn't translate, and you should have kept it the way it was and just continued the story from where you left off at. But this
so
one, I guess, makes
I'm gonna push
sense.
back on that a little bit because Roseanne was one of, if not the most watched show in the country at the time, and then she said that stupid shit that she said and got herself booted
But
off
it
the air.
was it,
But
and
it
to be
was
honest,
actually a wildly popular show
yeah, but it
when
was
she
wildly
came back.
popular because of her.
Yeah, but I mean, like, it was wildly popular because of her, but also because I guess if you watched, excuse me, if you watched Roseanne faithfully back then, I think that from what I heard, it sounded like they recaptured a lot of that magic from the earlier years, and
It's
it
just
wasn't just
that,
people just tuning in to see her. I mean, like, I think there's a
but
limit on
when
that.
you try
Like,
to
I
make
think that
something so relevant, you can sometimes lose, especially in the area of a reboot, when you try to make it so relevant, you kind of
Hmm.
lose some of the magic of what it was, and that's what I felt.
Yeah.
It did not age into the relevancy
Oh, okay.
aspect of
I
it. So
mean,
when it came to the relevancy of it, it wasn't as funny as it was because everything was so serious, and it
hmm
wasn't marketed as a dark version of Roseanne. It just was supposed to be Roseanne, and I think that it just
well,
even
wasn't
when
that the
looking at where
draw on
it
the first one?
it didn't
It
because
was
it
like
was
it was
it
just
was
Roseanne.
political. It was political. It had political satire in it, but it wasn't as heavy. Like everything was brought up to date, and it was just it wasn't. It didn't seem real. It just felt like they made a Roseanne for today, which
No, yeah,
kind
I
of took
don't.
away
I mean,
from it.
I didn't watch the old one. I think like I remember seeing a couple episodes.
So this one is
This is the
done,
best film I've seen. No, this second best film I've seen this year.
done.
Dune.
Dune.
Yeah, the the
I don't
the, the
know.
latest version is the second. Uh, yeah, second best film I've seen this year
Is
so
this the
far.
older version we're looking at, or is this
This
the
is a
version?
screenshot from the older version,
I was about to say this
and
didn't look
with this one, I think that this I say reboot, and I tend to I'm gonna lean towards this in these types of situations anyway because Dune is a novel,
good.
and like Dune is one of those novels where one of like there's some Stephen King novels, there are some Tom Clancy novels that are just really really difficult to nail on film because of their narrative structure, um, and various elements of the actual original source material, which would be the book. Um,
And that's the
and I
difficulty when you have something that started out as literature, and
Right.
when you're
So
creating it into another format, whether it's a reboot or not, it's always difficult because people want you to stay on script,
right.
and that's
And
it's hard to do that.
and it's hard to do that. And it's not like that with every book. Like
That's why I
I
love the
saw
color
like
purple
there's a
so
movie that
much.
comes to mind that I did not like, and I think the reason why I didn't like it is because as it just wasn't the right story to bring to film. It was too much of a simplistic story. Although it made for great reading, it did not make for a great
But
film.
that's the
Um,
job of a good screenwriter as well, because
right.
one of the reasons I love the color purple is in all three formats that we have it in now, it's a different perspective of the story. The book, of course, tells the whole story, but because of how the book was written, it was written as a diary. They
Hmm.
were able to, in the film, pull out certain elements, and then on stage, they were able to pull out certain elements that the other one did not pull out.
Gotcha.
It that was a good example of staying on script, but
Hmm.
having a fresh perspective
Gotcha.
to it.
So
So
I'm gonna go with reboot for Dune because they've already rebooted it, and I like
I'll have to
that
watch
movie
it.
was one of the best movies I've seen so far this year.
Okay. The next one is Grease. So
I'm
this
gonna
is
tell
right
you,
now.
I'm gonna have to say I don't really care. Um, uh,
If
Grease is
you are a
cool.
lover of musicals, this was one of those that most people who like musicals like. But I'll
Hmm.
have to say the translation into I don't think they ever try to make it into a TV show, but the stage production was very cheesy to me.
Okay.
So to watch it
I guess we
cheesy.
could reboot this. I think taking something. Yeah, I think this is a perfect time. I think you could, some of these songs are timeless, but then at the same time, why not? Like, why not give it an update?
Well, there
Like
are
most people enjoy the story, and then even if you gave it a reboot, you could reboot it in a way where like it's the original work, just
mhm.
updated, which is what they recently did with what West Side Story.
Well,
So,
a lot of the movie musicals were translated into a a stage production. But this is one of the films where people are starting to they want canceled because they feel like the blonde character, I can't remember her real name in real life. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, Olivia Newton-John
Yeah.
was John Travolta was problematic in this, in that it forced her to change who she was to be with him, and all those stereotypical issues. But people are asking for this
Right.
movie to be canceled. And for me, if
And
they
yeah.
reboot it or they redo it, just do it with a less cheesier cast and people who actually look like, because these people right here were supposed to be in high school and they don't look nothing like high schoolers. This be age appropriate. The Sopranos,
Nah, I think we good on that.
and that's seeing you one of the people. For me, hey, go at it. I think it did. Well, this was
Yeah,
the
but
series that
you're
ended
so unfair.
abruptly.
You just basing everything on you like basing everything on race, and you're just like, go ahead,
I'm just
remake
saying.
all the white,
Well,
remake
in
all the
that
white shit.
case, I because I've never watched it, so I wouldn't know the difference.
Okay. So The Sopranos was a really good show. I think it's one of those things where, like, it's a show about a crime family, and it's like, do we really need to remake those types of shows? Those are some of the easiest, I think, some of the easiest things to make.
Hmm.
There's no shortage of source material when it comes to like crime. Like I just wouldn't see the point of it. Like they just recently did a prequel, which I haven't seen yet, and I've heard
Of
mixed
this
reviews
TV
about.
show.
Yeah, and it's just really wasn't even a reboot. It was just kind of telling
I remember how
this
much people loved
story.
this. I
Yeah,
remember
it's a good
how
show.
many people loved it, but then I see a Empire or a show in that same vein
Hmm.
where it's like a criminal undertone to it. How they, how this was
There wasn't
done
no
in a
criminal
way where.
undertone to The Sopranos. There was a show about a crime family, a show about a
Well,
mob family.
I'm just comparing just that crime element and how it made it highlighted it and uplifted it versus if you have that same type of narrative in something else, it doesn't necessarily read as well and it comes across a little ghetto or just hood, and not necessarily to black people, but just
Hmm.
in general. So he wants to not reboot it. Um, Clueless. Do you care?
That's a
I
tough
think what's her
one.
name?
That's a tough one. Yo, Clueless was the shit though. This is a
I'm
tough
just
one.
saying, based off of
I'm on the fence about this one because this one of
everybody,
them joints is like I'd be like, nah, bro, watch the original.
I wouldn't want it done with the same cast because the only one that, in my opinion, has aged well would be Stacey Dash.
Well, no,
Although
if
other
they
people,
rebooted this, it wouldn't be with the same cast. I
I'm
don't
just
think.
saying. I said if it was done with the same cast, she would be the
Uh
only
huh.
one that would. But because of her popularity, it probably wouldn't do as well. But they would add them as teachers or something, or they would have to be in it in some way for people to really like it. Um,
Maybe.
what's the next one?
I think Gremlins would be a really cool reboot
Gremlins.
movie to reboot.
I don't. I just. This was one of those. I don't consider this. This was more suspenseful than it was like a horror movie. I just can't get out the habit of when they got wet, they multiply. Like I just.
Yeah.
That just I can't.
Yo, Gremlins was great. And then they went like full comedy with the second one, which I also thought was
Yeah.
hilarious. Because I actually thought both of them were good.
Because and that's for me. That's just keep the story going. Like this, even if you take it in a different direction, make sure you keep the integrity of where the story was. And
Hmm.
I mean, it was cheesy. You get the furry thing wet, and it duplicates.
Hmm.
Uh, this one is funny. Sex in the City. Um, I keep hearing like I was reading this one article where they were saying the age of these women
Hmm.
in the newest series of this is the same age that the Golden Girls were playing. And there's
Like when they first started,
right when they first started, they were the same age as these women.
which is an interesting concept, I think, in itself. I
Right.
watched, like I watched the first two episodes. Uh the funny thing is, like I think that there was like this disconnect. Like when I think about like who the target audience when Sex in the City was on,
Mm-hmm.
and this might have just been me because I was at a certain age, right? Like so, like all of these women are older than me, and yet I remember that there were women my age who were like infatuated with Sex in the City when it was originally on the air, which means that they were not as old as these characters. And if this show doesn't have legs, I think it's going to be because women their age probably weren't all in on Sex in the City in the first place, which means they might be a harder draw now. And I don't know how true that is, but I just remember that like everybody I heard raving about Sex in the City, like it wasn't like my mom and her friends. It was like my friends, right? Like
Yeah,
my lady
yeah, our
friends
generation. Yeah,
loved Sex in the City. And
yeah,
because they're not that age yet, I think that if this doesn't work out, it'll probably be because the fans of the original are just not that old and probably don't find the stories of these older women. I don't know if it's going to be interesting because it's much different from the Golden Girls in the sense that it's really set in like the modern today, as
yeah.
opposed to the Golden Girls, and it was more about the comedy of it.
Right.
Sex in the City to me was taking real situations and then finding the comedy in like real life, which I think I don't know. I don't know. We'll see how this turns out.
I just remember seeing a
I
few
know that.
episodes, and when I was younger, when it first came on, I'm like,
Mhm.
I just couldn't relate. And it's a whole debacle now that they have a black character. The movie had Jennifer Hudson as the assistant to, I
Mhm.
believe, Sarah Jessica Parker's character. But
That's
I,
true.
but and then this one, what's her name? Nicole Ari Parks is like the
Nicole
professor.
Ari Parker is in it, and
Yeah, she's in it.
there's another younger black actress in it as well,
Yeah, but it's just
supporting
that thing
character.
of I hate when we try to force out. Well, I don't think it's us necessarily, but when we try to add black characters to something and it just
Mhm.
doesn't come across it because they can't be a prominent character because they've already established the lineup. But it was supposed to.
Mhm.
So this character on the end, I can't remember her name. But the one in the red, they were supposed to replace her with a black woman, and that just didn't happen. But they just put I guess black characters in the storyline, so
Mhm.
it wasn't like they were replacing her. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't really this TV show was like Friends to me. I just didn't
Yeah.
like
I mean, not like
but
exactly, exactly.
I
It
couldn't
was
get
a
into it.
lot. Yep. I feel the same way. I'm gonna say, they already rebooted, but I'm gonna say give it the boot.
Right,
I'm not
iCarly,
sure.
I
I don't know
believe.
what this is. iCarly. I never watched iCarly.
iCarly.
I have no thoughts on this.
Right. So go ahead and
I'm gonna go
reboot.
with you on this. Go ahead and reboot it.
Go ahead and
Reboot all that shit.
reboot all that. Shit. This one is House of the Dragon.
House
With
of the
this
Dragon.
love.
So this is not so much a reboot as it is just another. It's more of an original story set in the same world. Um, it takes place like 300 years before the events of Game of Thrones. And Game of
Okay.
Thrones was vicious, yo. Like up until that seventh and eighth season, like Game of Thrones was pretty on point. I'm gonna say go ahead and give me this. Give me House of the Dragon. I want to see it.
You know, I always confuse Game of Thrones with what was the show where it was
Don't be
like a game
disrespectful.
show.
A game show.
It was a game show within the show, but it
Truman
was
Show.
I can never remember the name of because that's why I always confuse it too.
The
Um,
Truman Show.
not the Truman Show.
Hmm.
It was like they had to fight or something had to happen, but it was set in like a apocalyptic time, but it was like a game show, and
Well, I
your
don't know.
survival was it was something. I always confuse Game of
Like the
Thrones.
Hunger Games?
Hunger Games, yeah, that's what it was.
How
I
you
always
confuse Game of Thrones with the Hunger
because
Games,
I never
yo?
watched either one of them damn things. I always think when
Oh.
people
Well,
refer
first of
to
all, you need to treat yourself and watch Game of Thrones.
I watch, but I see that's the thing. I watched a couple episodes of Game of Thrones. What
Like,
no was
which
it Game of
episodes
Thrones?
did you watch? Did you
I don't
start with
remember
episode
it.
one?
No, I don't. And that's those
Yo,
ones like
yo,
you
just
don't start at
jumping
the
into the
beginning.
middle of Game of Thrones is like the worst thing you could ever do. No, you need to watch the first three episodes. And
Okay.
if you don't, if you're not hooked by the end of the third episode, then there's no hope for you.
So what
Period.
ended up happening was so for like a month I didn't have cable. And my friend had gave me this memory stick with all these TV shows and movies on it, and it was Game of Thrones and Hunger Games on it, and there was like random episodes of it, and I was watching it like, what the fuck am I looking at? And
Right.
it
You
was
see, you need to watch Game of Thrones from the first episode, bro.
just okay.
I've watched, I've watched, I've watched Game of Thrones 4 times,
y'all be too
like
pumped
the
about it
entire series. It's that good.
though. Okay, I'll take it where I'll watch it eventually, and we can talk about it later.
No, my lord. we'll be season 7, season 8, episode
Right.
30, talking about Game of Thrones.
So this right
Jesus.
years later. So this
every so Walking Dead is like the
yeah.
new Law and Order.
So
Like, you
I
know, there's
watched
like 3
it.
spin-offs of The Walking Dead already.
So I didn't know that. So I watched the actual Walking Dead, and for me, I like stuff like that because those are the type of video games that I like to play, where you were
Hmm.
just going through random houses and you could just. It wasn't like a point to the game, but I just liked. I love the fact that they were like having to hunker down and make these makeshift camps and they didn't know who to trust. Like I like that storyline. I really did like so I didn't know that they were spin-offs and
See, that's what I'm
until
saying,
I
man.
saw
You love
this.
Game of Thrones. You gotta
I didn't
watch it.
like Game of Thrones. This was
You
something
watched it
that
in the. You came in the middle of the. You came in the
yeah, but
random
this The
episode.
Walking
If you
Dead was
watched
something
a random episode of The Walking Dead, you probably wouldn't like that neither. Well, you might because you like zombies and like
yeah, I just
survivalist
like
stuff.
right, it was just right. It was just that. So no matter but with The Walking Dead, no matter where you came in on it, at some point
Uh-huh.
you gotta got the gist of the story. Like it wasn't so random that you would not pick up on relationships or something happens because something that happened before always caught up to them at some point, and then the story started changing. That's when I stopped watching The Walking Dead because it became too much. Like where are they going? Where are they going to travel
Hmm.
to next? And
Bro, you need to see Game of Thrones. But I'm here for the Daryl and what's the name spinoff show. Where
were
they
they
just
in a relationship or something? Were they lovers?
I'm gonna be honest, yo. I
You
feel the
don't
same way
even
about
know.
Walking Dead as you. I made it like 5 seasons, and after a while, I was just like, "It's no way these group of people are still alive together. I can't keep watching this."
Right, then that's why
Uh,
I stopped watching it because it became
I
unrealistic.
always felt like there was some sexual tension between these two, so I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up going there.
What
But
happened to me? Some of my favorite characters in it, stuff like when they killed the Asian dude, and like when it was just starting to be killing for no reason. It didn't make sense why they person. That's when I had to start watching
no,
it.
they had to keep it consistent with the source material, and for the most part, I think they have.
So I guess this next one is one of the spinoffs. Tales
Yeah,
of
that's
the
one of the
Walking
spinoffs.
Dead.
So they got The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, The Walking Dead World Beyond, uh,
That's what I see. That's too much. Every
and
character
then
gets a spinoff.
they get ready to come through. Well, actually, okay, so yeah, I think one of them kind of reformatted in the second season where they started bringing like some characters in from the original show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But no, for the most part, yo, Fear the Walking Dead was a show that was essentially like a prequel. It was set at the beginning of like the zombie apocalypse, so it was like a whole new cast of characters in a
So
whole
one of the
nother location.
so one of the things that was confusing to me is so they had to be bitten by one of the zombies in order to become a zombie. But if the zombie eats you, how the hell do you become a zombie? Like that was how were they growing? How were the zombies growing if they were just eating people?
What you mean growing?
Like the number of zombies. Like how was the number of zombies growing
Well, I mean, because I
if they
mean,
wasn't just
they
eating
wasn't
people?
like eating. I mean, they wasn't sitting there like having a whole like festive dinner and eating you down to the bone. Like they were just biting chunks of flesh out of you and moving on.
Hey Nikki, so I guess Nikki loves the Hunger Games.
Oh my god. It's
Yeah,
not even,
that's
I don't like, I'm not even, yeah, no. My
the next
fiance
one
likes
up.
the Hunger Games.
Now again,
Yeah, reboot it.
and for me, because it wasn't about who they well, it was storylines, but I think for each generation it doesn't because at some point we're gonna we stop watching the Power Rangers, so a new generation will watch it. So I'm not on a fence when it comes to cartoons or children driven shows because
Hmm.
over time people age out of stuff. So you can't just keep the same cast because the original Power Rangers probably like 50 years old at this point.
I'm sure they are.
So I don't have an issue with a reboot or a
Yeah,
remake of it
remake
because
it.
they kind of age
I
out.
actually thought the reboot they did a couple years ago was good, but I guess it didn't do well enough to warrant a sequel.
Right, right, right.
I actually thought it was a. I thought it. See, that's one of those remakes where they completely change things around, and
It didn't make
you know,
sense.
oh no, I thought it made sense.
Right.
But I think
Because
what a
wasn't
lot of
they
people,
ninjas at one point, and then they were
well, that was like the original Rangers. That was the original movie. The No,
okay.
they did a reboot. Like they did a hard reboot like a couple years ago.
Hmm.
Um, and I liked it. I liked it. I know it was a lot of controversy because Elizabeth Banks played Rita Repulsa.
Okay.
Um, but it made sense when you see the film because the Rita Repulsa, like the characters were very much like there were significant changes to the characters
Right.
based on like what we saw when we first started watching the show. Um, and Yeah, like I thought it worked.
Okay.
So I'm like
Well,
reboot this
reboot
shit
it.
till you get it right.
But that's I think that's
Because they
okay
set
with children's shows though.
well, I think it's okay with everything, but you know.
Well, that's because you're not loyal. You're not loyal.
I am loyal, yo. I am loyal, but I'm
Then
also forward thinking.
the next one is Frasier.
Oh my god. Who
Now,
gonna play Frasier?
Frasier was a spinoff of Cheers.
Who gonna play Frasier?
Frasier go play Frasier.
Oh, so it's not a remake, it's a reboot. I mean it's a
I mean,
that's
I don't
like
know
and
that to
like
be. I'm
like
not
yo,
saying
like
that
let
like
me ask you something, yo.
100%.
Like if you playing a character and then you take 20 years off and you come back playing the same character, is that even a reboot for
I would say it. Well, that's
real?
what a
Like
reboot is.
is Sex in the City, is the new Sex in the City a reboot? Or
Well,
is
I
it
think
just like,
no. Well,
hey, we're back?
no.
Like
Well,
we took breaks in between seasons.
the reboots are when most of the same cast come back. The remake is when they do it with a totally different cast. A
Okay.
reboot is when they bring back the principal characters and they
Okay, so
just
we'll call these the
continue the
reboots.
story.
Okay,
Like
so we'll call this a
a
reboot.
lot of the TV shows we used to watch when we were younger, a lot of them are being rebooted. Like the Raven Simone, Not So Raven,
Hmm.
or what was the one with the twins, the Olsen twins? Those are reboots, so they're bringing them back.
Or like the
You
new
know,
Full House and all that.
yeah, the Full House. That's what I'm at. Full House.
Yeah.
So those are reboots. A remake is if they do the same show and it's a
Oh, okay.
different Frasier.
So they rebooting Frasier.
Well, it says in 2019, Kelsey Grammer, who was Fraser, confirmed a reboot of the series was moving forward. It's been in the works for a few years. So,
I'm gonna say give it the boot, and you know why, yo? Because like Kelsey Grammer, like I actually enjoy him. And his like his and later in his career, he's taken on more serious and even in some cases very sinister style
mhm,
roles, and I think I
right.
prefer him in those. Like I don't know if I want to see him go back to
This
like
is it's
lighthearted.
this show. Frasier was like Seinfeld for me. It was a show about nothing. It was situational comedy, and I I mean, I was an old man as a child, so stuff like this
Hmm.
was, you know, it
Right
was
up your
silly,
alley. You loved it.
right?
You
Because
loved
it was
it.
boring TV.
You
It was
loved
boring
it.
TV. It was adult humor that
You
I
loved it.
got
You
as a
showed up
child.
at the playground and everybody was talking about The Simpsons, and you was like, "Yo, y'all see Frasier last night?"
Well, actually, I had older friends like my grandmother's age, so
Don't
she
act like
loved
you ain't
it.
go to the playground though.
I did not go to the playground. I didn't like getting dirty as a child, so that wasn't
Oh
me.
man.
But
Oh
I mean,
man.
shows like this are comical, but I would wonder what he would talk about at this point of his life. It's gonna be, and my favorite character passed away, his dad, in the show,
Hmm.
so that's gonna be the thing. But I always loved
Yeah.
him and his brothers
I'm gonna say
banter.
get us doing the boot. Let's keep
Well,
Frasier dark. Let's keep Frasier dark.
no, I don't want it dark. I just
No,
pick up
not
on that.
Frasier. I'm talking about Kelsey Grammer because I like as an actor, like
Kelsey Grammer kind of cool though. You got to get into it.
I know,
Go
but that's
watch
what I'm
an episode or
saying.
two.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, I like what he's been doing in the later part, in the like the
He
back
probably
end of
still
his
gonna be
career.
single.
I'm like, come on, keep that going.
He's
Don't
still
nobody
gonna be
want to see no
single.
old ass. Don't nobody want to see no old ass still single Frasier.
But see, it's probably going. It's other things like his child, and it's gonna be probably centered around his child. So that's gonna be the new age part of it. But I don't know.
I guess.
Reboot it. Reboot them white people things. Just
Yeah, reboot this. Yeah, go ahead and reboot this. Miami Vice. They rebooted this already though.
Nash Bridges.
Oh, this is Nash Bridges, not Miami
Yeah.
Vice. I don't know. I never watched Nash Bridges. I like Miami Vice though.
I watched it a little bit, but by the time I watched this, I knew who Cheech and Chong was. So it
Hmm.
was weird watching him in this type of role. Like he
Hmm.
was, like the bumbling sidekick. But it was interesting him not being high, and I didn't like it because he wasn't high. Uh, well, I think you're gonna like this one, but
What's up?
it's
What's
gonna be a
next?
bittersweet Boondocks.
But
Um,
this a reboot, not a remake.
well,
Like they bringing it back.
yeah, but the sad part is, the granddad is gonna be voiced by someone else,
And
or
if Virginia, yeah, and like is Virginia King involved?
well, that would be the question. I mean, sorry, did you read the article? Because you did say that,
Nah, give it the
right?
boot. Give it the boot. Give it the boot. Give it the
But
boot.
I think it's a
Nope.
cartoon, so it's possible.
Give it the
What if they
boot.
start with the grandfather's funeral?
If Regina King ain't involved, give it the boot.
I mean, who else would they put into the role though if they don't put her in it?
I don't
Because
know.
then she played, but because she played both for the brothers. Were they
Yo,
both
Regina King
boys?
is booked and busy, bro. She might not got time for this. A
Well,
lot
she
of these
better because
casting
this kept her.
decisions just really come down to a lot of times some of the casting decisions that we get really just be coming down to scheduling and stuff like that. If Regina King not involved, give it the boot.
Well,
If
see,
she's
but see,
involved, I'm for it.
the thing with animated things are they're not done in the same timing as we see it. So typically, like
Mm.
each episode is like a year out. So
Hey
they
man,
do the episode. All she
if
has to do is just switch
Regina
over.
King, yeah, yo, but when you booked and busy, yo, that's still time. You
She's
gotta know
not
your
that booked and
lines.
busy because this is what kept her relevant in between.
Yo,
So
first
she
of all, I
better
don't know
give
how
it.
true that is because I don't even know if a lot of people knew until later that she was the voice of both of those boys.
I
But it,
mean, relevant in terms of a paycheck because she wasn't doing
uh,
that many movies at one point. Like after 227, she wasn't doing that much. So this
man,
kept her relevant
I don't
until she
know. I
took
mean, I
over.
don't know about all that. Yo, I'm just saying, like,
I'm just
if she
saying.
not, all I'm saying is if she not involved, I don't want it.
Well, I mean,
If
we
she
already know Jim's a
if she not as
granddad.
booked and busy as
But
And I
that's what
think
I'm saying. So voiceover work is different than regular film. So they typically, and they do like a lot of the films that she did, she was still doing boondocks throughout the whole process. So I'm sure she can make the
I'm not
time
saying
to,
it's not
because
possible,
it's
yo.
just
I'm
her
just saying,
recording her lines. That's
yeah,
all she's doing.
that still takes some preparation and work,
It
yo.
don't,
Like
girl. Just read those lines. Go cold read.
all I'm saying is, if she ain't involved, you can give it the boot. I don't know what this is.
Yeah, so go reboot that white people stuff. Go ahead.
Yeah, um, I don't care. That's
Now
white people
I'm gonna
stuff
have
too.
this. So this was a
I mean,
Nickelodeon show.
I watched that show. I like that show, but I don't care now.
Now I'm going to say this was the first thing I ever auditioned for. Um, and the last season of it, the last actual season of it, I auditioned for this and they canceled it,
Mm.
and I was heartbroken. Um,
Oh.
I was.
So you want them to reboot it so you can try it again?
No, I mean because
I mean, you ain't
they
gotta
made.
lie.
Well, you know what? They may make it into an adult show though, because remember this was a kid
It
show.
sounds like that's what you hoping.
I mean, part of me feels like yeah, a lot of the old game shows are coming back. I want to do this one, and I want to do Supermarket Sweep.
Mm.
Well, I mean, we can audition for Supermarket Sweep. You probably like that.
I don't want to audition for Superman. See,
I just want to win the
wanted to
money.
audition. I wanted to grow up and audition for American Gladiators.
American. Oh no, that's the one where you falling off shit. I ain't got time for that.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about right there.
If it's good
Now,
prize money, I'll do it.
honestly, like American Ninja Warrior would be but I ain't ready for that. I can tell you that right now. I thought I was, because when you know how you watch stuff on TV and you just be like, yeah, I could do that. But then I took my sons to like Sky Zone and like tried to climb
You ain't want that smoke. I get it.
the little wiggly bridge and
Got a little
realized that
winded.
nah.
I think I
Mm-mm.
saw you. I think I saw some pictures of what you had, and I was like, "He looks hot."
Yeah. I posted that video because
Yeah,
I ran up that wall, right? And
right.
I made it up that wall. But yeah, I wasn't posting none of them other videos because
I think
y'all
y'all
have been
had your
yeah.
shoes off, and you was first of all you were dressed inappropriately for
I
those
was. I
pictures.
didn't know what to expect. I'd never been to Sky Zone. You're right. I was dressed
I
inappropriately.
said, "What was he prepared
Well,
for?" They
first of
wanted
all,
you to look
I
good.
was dressed inappropriately, but I also didn't go there thinking that I was going to participate. Like I
Well,
thought
yeah,
I was
'cause
just
you
going to
see,
pay
when
my
you go
money.
there, I
I
took
thought
my
I was just
niece
going to
there.
pay and I was going to sit over somewhere
Right?
where all the cool dads were sitting at and just watch
No,
our sons.
and
No.
the cool
Like
dads were up there
then I
doing
walked
the same
in
thing.
and I was like, "Oh, hold up, y'all. How much is the adult socks? I'm
Right,
going. I'm about to show y'all how to do this." And I did not show them how to do that at
right. And
all. I completely
I
embarrassed
see.
myself.
I took my nieces a couple times, and when I tell you, I saw a lot of dads getting their feelings hurt because
Yeah,
they
yeah.
thought
But
they could do it.
I'm gonna say reboot this. Damn, bro, you going through the whole list?
I mean, we only got one more left. We went through the list.
Oh, who the
You
hell is
told
this
me
right
all
here?
of them. I
Who
followed
the hell is this
directions.
right here?
So this one
I did
was.
not say all of them. I sent this as a reference.
So you got to
You did
tell
not
me.
understand the
You
assignment,
got to
sir.
give me specific directions, sir.
All right, all right. I'm
So
gonna remember that.
this one right here, the Proud Family.
It's a live action or another? Is it a reboot?
I wouldn't mind this as a live action. Yeah,
Um,
I wouldn't mind this as a live action, or just a live if they just took it out of animation and made it an
mhm.
actual show. Because I remember the grandmother was Jennifer Lewis, so she's
All
still
right, so let's
doing it.
reboot it then. Let's reboot it.
We'll reboot it. And I forgot who
So
I
see,
think the dad
most of the
was.
stuff on this list, Nate, you was like, let's reboot it. I think you like
No,
the
just the
remakes and the reboots, yo.
I told you I don't mind, but most of the cartoons, most of my stuff was the cartoons, and
I
I
think it's
remember
unfair
Tommy
to
Davis was a
pigeonhole this
dad.
into a cultural thing now.
Yeah, I don't know
I
what this
do.
is. I don't know what this
Yeah,
is.
yeah, you might as well just take this down. I don't even feel like now. I haven't seen this yet. I'm interested. More part of the reason why I hadn't seen it is
Right.
because after being spoiled by streaming, I get really upset when it's on a streaming network, but they're gonna give
Yeah.
it to me week by week. So
Oh,
I usually try to let the episodes build up. I've heard nothing but good things about it so
now
far, though.
you will. I'm
So,
gonna say you will like this. And if you know, the Wonder Years used to be a white show, uh,
hmm
like in the '80s. Was this the '80s or the
the
'90s?
90s. Yeah.
Yeah, like the early '90s, late '80s. So this was a good show. I think you would definitely like it because it did not change the time period of the show, which was
Right.
very interesting because
It
while
just focuses on the black family.
right, but at the same time, the original Wonder Years didn't talk about Martin Luther King getting shot and none of that.
No,
While
it
that
didn't.
was
It
going
ignored.
on, this
Yeah,
show does it.
yeah.
So
So
you
I'm
get
there.
all
I'm there for it.
you get all those historical points. So this is definitely a show. I'm saying you gonna like the show.
Okay.
Uh, I think this is
So
the
give me
last
the
one.
remake. What is this? Designing women?
Design
Nah,
and Woman.
no. Dude, I mean the first show wasn't that good.
You didn't like it?
Designing women? Hell no. I had why y'all like, come on, bro. I grew up in a black
Well,
household. I
see,
ain't watch all this
this
shit.
was our.
Like the
So
Golden
you
Girls,
love
that was it.
Golden Girls, and I love Designing Women, and I just don't feel like you can recapsule that type of funny. You just can't. You can't.
I'm gonna take the word for it.
Well, you had your white lady show, and this was my white lady show, so no reboot.
My white ladies is better than your white ladies.
Well, I mean, it's all relative.
Man,
So
I
we have
think.
a few
I mean, we
moments
should take a vote. Can we take a vote on this thing? Like, can the listeners
with
vote?
Designing
Everybody, I
Women. We
think.
can.
Yeah,
I'll
God,
put it up
yeah,
on our
designer women
page.
or golden girls.
We can put
Yeah,
it
let's
up
take a
there.
vote and see what we get. I
And the
guarantee you getting
ratchet
blown
people are
out the
going to
water.
the ratchet people are going to
Oh, we
choose
ratchet
designer.
now. We
Well,
ratchet
that's what
now.
happens.
We
That's what
ratchet
happens.
now. See. When they know
That's
they
what happens.
can't win, they gonna start throwing insults. Now we ratchet.
Y'all ratchet. You have to be real
We ratchet.
sophisticated to like designer women.
That's because the designer women couldn't handle them insults from Blanche and them.
And we had a black man in our show.
So, token black guy, like,
Well, the
you know,
actual
wasn't
point
nobody checking
of
for
this
him.
episode, which we just went through, was reboot or
We're gonna
give the
get off
boot.
that topic real quick.
But we definitely
All right, what's the final word, yo? Remakes or no?
I'm gonna stick to it for the most part. No,
You saying no? All
because it's
right,
never
give
done with
him.
the right energy.
Okay,
So I'm
I
gonna
don't
say
know.
so.
Okay, go ahead. I'm gonna
For
let you handle.
me, I was talking on Friday after my show Friday. My engineer was talking to me about this first show, called Mortal.
Mm-hmm.
And you came at me with the show Chronicles,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna talk about that one second. But they kind of, for me, it's all about the premise, and it was about human nature. And I realized in watching, so I'm not a big uh, comic book fan. Have you seen the show? Because I don't want to ruin it for you.
Yeah, I seen the movie.
Okay, so at, it is based off of a character. Is it comic book or am I saying this?
Norse mythology.
Mythology. And I myself, I learned Latin. I took Latin all throughout school. So me learning about those Greek mythology characters was interesting to me, but I didn't. The name that they gave him, Thor, I was not familiar with that name until it was told to me that it was the god of war. But this movie for me, and I don't typically get into movies like this or the second
Mm-hmm.
one we're going to review, but it was so interesting because I equated both of the movies to human nature, how we treat people who are different. And even from the start, to be honest, the movie, it was a hard watch. So it took me
Mm.
2 sit downs to actually watch the whole film. But I really enjoyed it. I
Yeah, it
enjoyed,
was pretty good. It was a decent film. It was alright.
but I think it was a good intro. So whatever's gonna come after this, I think it's gonna be much better than this
Oh,
first.
ain't nothing coming after this.
I feel like it is, especially the way it ended.
Mm-mm. No,
It
I
just
can tell
feel
you,
like
I can tell you that when they made this movie, they were probably hoping, but that's where we get to the business side of things. Ain't gonna be no sequel to this movie.
I don't know. I think it's gonna be the way this ended because it didn't have an ending to it. It felt
But
like
that's
the
just what I'm.
beginning to
But
whatever's
see,
next.
and that takes me back to my argument about why, and ultimately why I understand and appreciate and like tolerate remakes, because this movie not getting a sequel, and it's not because it wasn't. I'm sure they intended to continue this story. It's not getting a sequel because it bombed. It was
Uh,
a decent film. It was a decent film,
but see, I don't
but
watch films that way
it,
anymore.
huh?
I think for me, it's hard to watch films for that reason, and I never watched films for that reason
No
anyway. But
one watches
whether
them, but
you
that's the thing,
know,
Nate. No one watches them for
but we
that
don't
reason.
know because of the
But it's not
platform
the
they're
watchers
on.
who make the film, and the people who make the film are putting their money up.
Yeah,
Okay, and
but
and it's funny.
how much did the
It's
movie make? Because for me,
like less than $200,000, like in the theatrical run. Now, how many people have bought it? What they sold it
right?
for when it went on
Because I didn't know
VOD?
it was in the
But I
movie
can tell
theater.
you that there's no way they made anywhere near the money. This film cost. This had a moderate budget.
Hmm.
It cost about $17 million. It
Hmm.
made less, like its global, worldwide theatrical run.
Hmm.
It made less than $200,000.
Mm. I mean,
It's
I
not
don't get
getting a
into.
sequel.
I mean, I feel like it should get a sequel,
I
but
felt like it
I
should get a
like
sequel too, but I also
I
understand.
just
I felt
like
like the
the.
last Power Rangers movie should have got a sequel, and they decided that it was probably more profitable to reboot the franchise a
But
second
I'm
time.
wondering how well is it going on the platform that it's on as well.
No
Because
matter
I think
how
this
well it
was
does on the
on.
platform, yo, it can.
Was
It's
this on
never
Netflix?
making $17 million. It's never making back that
I
seventeen
think this was
million
on.
dollars. It ain't
I
doing
think it
that
was on
well.
Amazon. That's what it was on Amazon.
Yeah, and I think this one was on Amazon for free, which means that Amazon played a flat rate for it
Hmm.
to have it on this platform. Like it'll be 10 years
But
before
I
they
wonder
break
how
even
well
on this
it's
movie.
doing. And I should have. I didn't look at.
That I'm not
They
sure. That
normally,
I'm not sure of.
but I wonder how well it's doing because it was at the top of the list when I went. Since I went to Amazon, it was at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Yeah,
was.
I mean it's an interesting film. It's an interesting concept, and then it's an
I just like
original
the social.
story, right?
I, lo-
Even
I
though
love the social link to it. How we treat people who we deem are different because they could
yeah,
have handled them much
I
differently.
mean,
But
that's X-Men too. But like I didn't really dig that deep into the film or the underlying themes of the film itself. I just thought it was a decent film.
now, what
Um,
ended up happening when it first came on? That's what I thought I was watching. I thought I was watching like a X-Men spinoff or something because
yeah, it had a lot of that vibe.
I just knew he was going to be. What's the guy with the scissors in his hands, the blades in his hand? I thought that's who he was. Who he was, like the young version of that.
Nah,
But
nah.
it was an
No.
interesting,
This was an original story. Like
right?
um, and someone took a chance on it.
Hmm.
And like from the business aspect, like this is what can happen, and this is why I think we see less original works because
But when you say that, for me, a lot of the times that I've seen original works not work is because
mhm.
just like in music, if you don't give it the proper promotion, like people don't know about it. Now the issue I would have with the
But the
film, it
proper
wasn't. It
promotion,
felt like
even that, but that's what I'm saying. That you could be absolutely right, but then promotion costs money as well.
yeah.
You
So
know what I'm saying? So like
why even take a chance on something?
there are
That's a waste
certain
of money if you're not
films
gonna promote it.
that, but it's not a waste of money. Like what if all you had enough, what if all you had was enough to get the film made?
I think there are creative ways to market,
Like and that's the thing.
especially
Just
if this
because
was
you
made. Wasn't
promote
this
it
made
well
during?
it
This came
doesn't
out
mean
during
people
the.
gonna come
This
out
came
and
out
see
last
it,
year,
Nate.
right?
I don't know when it came out.
But I mean, even if they didn't see this, I've seen a lot of original pieces that people would have seen had
Hmm.
they marketed it differently. And right
That's
now,
like the data doesn't support that at all, Nate.
yeah,
The
it
data doesn't support that
absolutely
at all.
does.
It's literally like people go see
It
something,
absolutely because
and then
a lot of those
because it
things,
makes
a
money,
lot of
they
those
now
films
have more
become
money to market a sequel. It's
yeah, but a
very,
lot of
very
those films become cult classics because people discovered the film that they didn't know existed. For me, I didn't know that this film. I didn't even know that this movie came
this
out
isn't
last
a cult
year.
classic, Nate.
No, I didn't say it was a cult classic. I said,
Okay,
for
cult classics are
example,
like cult classics are outliers that happen every now and then.
no, but a lot
That's
of
not. It's not
times,
like there's a lot of cult
no.
classics when you look at them in their totality. But like literally, we might get three movies. We might get three of those films per year.
But still, per year, there's still a lot of films. In my case, over the years, I say a lot of films that would have done better had they got proper promotion. And I think it's a waste of time and money to do a film if you're not going to have the money to promote it or find creative ways to because right now I know a lot of films that I know they're not putting a lot into the budget to market it, but they're using social media wisely to do so. And it's just
Like,
a lot of I mean, just you just see it on film now. I mean, you see it on social media now. The way that they're, it's
but
the
yo, that still
interview
costs money.
styles,
Yo, like
the behind the
even
scenes.
when you put stuff out on social media, a lot of times as an ad, it costs money.
Yeah, but considering what it would have cost if you did it how you typically do it, I think we have more spaces right now. Especially if you try not to market it like just going around the regular press junket where you're going on a Tonight Show. Like those people don't buy. The people when you get them directly on social media, I think they buy, and that's just me helping other people market their productions and such. I think using social media for what it is for a lot of free stuff is very beneficial to people. And as a business owner, I just know social media is much if you work social media, if you learn it a certain way, then you can do more with it. And I think a lot of these films, they need to go a grassroots method in their marketing and promotion. But overall, I like the film. I think it was interesting. It did feel like an very extended trailer to me. Like it was something that they cut that was supposed to fill in the story, but it was an interesting movie to me. But I looked at it from a psychological perspective or uh, a social perspective where it was about how people treat people, and that was the kind of the thing between both of these films, or how
Hmm.
does power corrupt. And in this case, he couldn't control his powers, which made the film very interesting because you never knew what was going to happen next. But I would be curious as to what a remake, not a remake, but a sequel to this would look like. Like where does
I
the
would be
story go?
curious too, but we ain't getting one. Just gonna hang that up.
I don't know. It may come. You never know.
I don't think so.
The second film for tonight and the last film for tonight is Chronicle.
Now this is where what I was saying with Mortal goes in the opposite direction,
Mm-hmm.
and I just feel like it doesn't happen enough. Now the funny thing about Chronicle is that I don't think Chronicle originally was not being marketed that well,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But it did so well overseas that I think they did kick up the
But this is an
promotional
older
marketing.
film. This is
What
an
is
older film
2012?
compared to Mortal.
Well, this came out in 2012.
But didn't Mortal come out last year? Did I read that wrong?
I can't let me look it up. Hold on. Mortal, yeah, Mortal came out last year. Um,
But I think that's what happened. Well, a lot of American stuff, it doesn't pop until it goes overseas and it becomes everything to them.
well, no, both of these films were released overseas first. Then they came to the United States. I think with
Mm.
Chronicle, there was, I think, if I remember correctly, um, I felt like Chronicle got a marketing budget. But it probably was the result of how well it had done overseas, because Chronicle was in a new space. It's a I think it's a better film than
Mm-hmm.
Mortal. I think it has a better premise. I think it also, like, like the guy who is in Mortal is relatively unknown. This had some relatively unknowns as well at the time, but I feel like
Mm-hmm.
they had two. They have it. Like, I think for both Michael B. Jordan and Dane DeHaan had kind of started to already build a name for themselves. Like, they
Yeah,
were
well,
not
I know
complete
Michael B. Jordan at that
unknowns
point
they
because
were
this
not.
was after The Wire, actually.
Yeah,
Way
so they were
before.
not completely. They weren't. Neither one of them were complete, like, unknown actors at the time. But Chronicle was marketed very. Chronicle had two things going for it. One, it came out in that found footage era where they were like filming films as if they
Mm-hmm.
were like happening. Like, oh, someone, I filmed this and it really happened, type of thing. And
Everything just
because
happened
of the
so fast
premise,
on it.
huh?
Everything just seemed to happen so fast,
Well, yeah, I
especially
mean,
the
but
first part of it.
that was the thing with a lot of the found footage movies, right? Like, the first found footage film that was wildly successful was the Blair Witch Project, and then from there, it just kind of took on a life of its own, like every other film. So you got Chronicle, you got what's the other one that was really popular? J.J. Abrams did. Can't think of the name of it right now, but Chronicle, definitely, not only was it one of the better found footage films, but then the premise itself was just, it was a cool premise. It was a
I didn't
really
like
cool
how the
premise.
beginning of it was. The rest of the movie kind of fizzled out and it was a good pacing, but the beginning, like how they got their powers, happened so fast.
Hmm.
And it just was like one story, and then it jumped to him being at this party, and then
They got powers.
right, and it just
Yeah.
that was the only thing that like I had to go back and watch it again. Like, did that? How the hell did that? Was he down there with him? Like what? But then
Hmm.
I realized once I watched it the second time, like they all were down there. But it was just
Hmm.
I like the film, but again, I said the theme that I picked out the both of them is just how we treat each other. Like this one was more like power, ultimate power corrupts. Like he
Yep.
just wasn't listening, and it was based off of his traumas in life. But it just he just
Hmm.
snapped at one point, and it just
Yeah.
he
Hurt
ended
people,
up
hurt
killing,
people.
being the cause of both of them. Um,
Yeah, hurt people, hurt people.
yeah, it was an interesting. It was definitely an interesting story. Both of them was. I liked Chronicle because it just seemed a lot smoother, and you didn't have to outside of the beginning of the movie where it sped up. You could just follow it, and I kind of understood was about what was about to happen, like midway. But
Uh-huh.
I didn't. The things that happened, like Michael B. Jordan character getting killed, stuff like I didn't expect any of that to happen.
Right.
Um,
So
yeah.
this film, and this is what I'm talking about, and this to me is one of those outliers, but it kind of, you could take this and use it as fodder for your side of the argument. But this is a film that was, made on a budget of like $12 million. So this cost less than Mortal, right?
Mhm.
And it grossed $126 million at the box
Mhm.
office. I mean, this is like what is it, Napoleon Dynamite type of numbers, right? Very small
Yeah.
budget, very very big gross outcome, and it happens. Um,
I'm gonna look over like their marketing schedule, like when it came out. I'm
mhm.
getting more interested in like marketing patterns.
But
Um,
like,
because,
yeah, and
because
like
some things need to be marketed, and depending on what
it's not
came
going to be
out
marketed.
around
The
it,
funny,
makes a difference.
and then that's what I'm saying. A lot of times it just comes down to money, because everything is not going to be like the stuff that gets marketed is usually studio films, right? Like, it's very very hard to, like, if you are on the line for marketing your own film, like, you can't compete with the marketing machine that is like Disney, right? and they're
Mhm.
always going to market their films. Chronicle was an independently made film, but because it had done well overseas, it was actually bought by a U.S. studio,
Right.
and then they invested money into its promotion.
Right.
And studios do that based on whether or not they feel like they have a viable product. And like we've seen huge marketing go into movies that have bombed.
Right.
We've seen that happen. So it happens on both sides. And I think from a business perspective, I think one of the things that it's a safe bet. Remakes are a safe bet, and I think that's why we see so many of them, and we see so many like people in the industry from all levels willing to like invest in those remakes because that familiarity that the public has with certain work
And,
has been
I
shown to
get
be
that.
a safe investment.
I get that, but as an artist, I am definitely from a space of um, quality over quantity. And that doesn't always get an artist paid, but I would rather have on record the quality things that I've done versus me doing all of these things. And maybe that's why I'll never be, you know, the top A list, artist or actor. But for me, it becomes a historical thing. It becomes a cultural thing where we have to hold tight to our stories and our narratives, and we can't just keep pushing things out to make room for new. That we have to hold tight to our history, and that's just been really important to me as an artist. So I get the financial and politics around why we still create all these reboots. I get that. It was a pattern that worked for somebody else, and let's do it for us. So I get that, especially if a certain industry owns that work. Let's just fill a space out. But I don't like how we do that within our entertainment culture. I don't like that pattern of how it's only room for one of us. So let me just remove you
But
and
that's
put
not
me
our
in that
culture, though.
place.
That's not something. First,
That
that's not
that's what I
something.
see culturally. That's what I see culturally, like a
But
lack of
that's
respect.
something that was imposed on us back when we didn't
I
have the
get it.
resources to like. Yeah, we don't have that anymore.
I'm not
So
putting
like,
I'm not putting a I'm not pointing a finger at anybody in terms of who is to blame. I haven't done that. I'm
don't call
just
it our
saying I'm
culture if
aware of
it's
it.
like white supremacist structures that have prevented us from being able to like own our own stuff. You can't say that's our culture.
No, I can say it's
As
our
if we
culture because
decided that there could only be one
but
Denzel
that's not.
Washington.
But
No, we
that's
had
not.
no control
But
over that.
that's not what I said. I said culturally, meaning it's happening from within and it's happening to us. I didn't point the finger as to who was doing it and who fault it was
But
because I think it's blame on both
That's not
sides.
something that's happening from within.
A
Like what
lot
we're
of it
seeing in the
is.
hold up,
A
what
lot
we're
of it
seeing in the
is.
film industry now
Just in the arts, I'm speaking in
is
the
what's
arts in
happening
general.
when it's happening from within.
I'm speaking in the arts in general, where you're ripping something off of something that is already there, and you're not paying that thing any homage. We see that in our music industry. We see that in our art world. We see that in our theater world. We're seeing it across the board where you're getting inspiration from something, but you're too arrogant and cocky to even give respect to it. That's what's happening within our culture. Outside of our culture, towards our culture, we see a lot of financially making decisions like that worked for that time. Let's do this again and let's get some fresh faces into it. That's what I notice culturally. That's what I notice within the industry. That's what I notice with as an artist.
So
And, and
I don't know how you arrive at that conclusion because like if you're a black playwright, every time somebody puts on your play, you get royalties from it.
not if they
When
steal
someone
your premise.
samples,
Not when they steal your. It's a show right now that's on Broadway that's based
hmm
off of a play that we. I don't know if you saw a real nigga show, but it's based off a
hmm
real nigga show. They came to see the play, and then they created a play off of it, and they got to Broadway with a watered down version of it. Whether
Mm.
it's fair or not, I don't. That's not the issue that
Yeah,
I'm
but that's
talking
not.
about.
I mean, like no one would call that a remake. Like.
But
Let's be clear
but
here. Like we're
if
talking
you
about a
but
remake
if you saw
or a
something,
reimagining of a work,
no, but
and
it
we're
is a
talking, and you're talking
reimagining of
about
a work.
somebody stealing,
Yes,
or yeah. So you're talking about somebody stealing
yes.
work
Did you
and
see a
going
real nigga
off.
show?
I've seen a real nigga show.
So if you see this show that's on Broadway right now, you'll say,
Can you
"Oh,
tell us
this
what it's
is a."
called, or is that an offline conversation?
No, it's not offline. I'm just not gonna say the name. I don't want to promote something that's thievery.
So it's an offline conversation. You need to let me know what the
Yeah,
show
I'll
is.
let you. When we
Oh,
go,
okay.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, I mean that's
But
that's
that
that's
happens a
that's
lot of
theft. That I
times.
mean that's theft. That's stealing.
Yeah, but a lot of that is
That's not
happening.
we're
You
not
can't say
talking
that
about that
doesn't
though.
happen.
We're talking about at least I thought we were talking about like bona fide, like approved remakes, reimaginings of works that have already existed, not this idea of like, oh, I saw you do something and I'm gonna
But
secretly take
that's
it and go do my own thing.
but that
And
that
like,
happens though. And I'm saying across the board. Now, is it every situation? No. Sometimes people just
but I'm
want to
not
buy
saying
the
no.
rights to
What
something and
happened? I'm
restore
not
it.
saying what happened in the instance of what you're talking about doesn't
But it
happen. I'm
happens
saying
though.
that's not what we're talking about.
But that's what I was referring to this whole time. And that's
The
one of
whole
the reasons
time you
you
talking about
asked me
people
why I
stealing
don't like
stuff.
it. But the question was, well, you didn't ask me the question, but the purpose was, why don't I like remakes? And that's one of the reasons why I don't like them. I don't like them. Not now. We just talked about reboots and remakes, but for
Mm-hmm.
me, remakes are something that I don't typically like. A reboot is typically something that has already been done, where we bring back as most of the principles
Yeah,
back.
no, okay.
So
So
a
in
reboot is
the
much different because it's that cast and that crew and that team saying let's redo this. And often when that happens, the people who were acting in it typically have ownership over it. And we saw that in Sister Act. We saw that in Sister Act with Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg became the executive producer. We saw that The
mm-hmm.
Color Purple, where Oprah became the executive producer. We see that in reboots, but that same integrity does not happen when we have remakes of something. And a remake isn't necessarily like
But you
a
still can't make a
legal
remake
remake of
without
something.
permission of the people who own it.
But that happens. But that often happens
That
in
never
remakes.
happens. It
That
never
happens a
happens. You
lot.
can't
It
you can't
it
just you
happens
can't
a
just
lot.
take a movie and remake it without having the permission
Yeah, but
and paying
if
the
you don't
people who
call it,
originally, not
if
just
you
because
don't,
everybody
but if
involved
you
don't get
don't
paid.
call it, if you don't call it something, or if say
Yo, but well, like
so a
you
lot of
changing the
times, so a lot
conversation,
of
yo, like
times, if not, but that's what I've been referring to this whole time. If
give
that's
me
not
what,
what
but you
you were
changing the
referring to, that's
conversation
fine.
even for the
No, I
people who
didn't.
listening.
I didn't
It's
change the
like
conversation.
that's
This
not
is
a
what I've been
remake, Nate.
saying.
That's not a
But
remake.
from the
If
time
I
we
take
first
your
started
idea,
going,
if I take your movie and go make another movie and just title it differently, that doesn't qualify as a remake.
that's actually what a remake is, but it's not a
That is
legal
absolutely
in my
not what a
case,
remake
it's
is,
not a
Nate.
legal remake of something. But that happens all the time. We saw that in the we see that in the TV shows like Living Single. Friends was made off of Living Single. Now, can they prove that it was the same concept? Yeah, they can prove it because it was the same people who passed on Living Single who then went and created Friends because we know that Living Single was supposed to be called Friends. And they then used the name and came up with the same all white concept. So it's not for me. It's that's my point why I don't like remakes, why I don't like certain types of films because you can see clearly this is where they got this from. And it's been a legal way of stealing people's ideas when you call something inspired by something. And that's why I don't have an issue with reboots. And that's why when we were going through the list, it just seemed like, oh, you do like remakes if it's done in the right way. But if it's an adaptation of something or a reboot, I don't have an issue with that. because typically an adaptation, you bought the rights from this person to be able to use their material or their concept, and you created a different perspective. When you just outright just making something over and just putting new faces in it, I don't typically like that. I don't, and it doesn't normally do well, in my opinion, for
Mm.
me. But I get what your
Well,
get your perspective, and but I just hold true to it. I don't typically like remakes.
mm. Wow, I have no problem with them, especially when they're done right. I think what you're talking about is something completely different than a remake, but you want to pigeonhole it into the exact same thing. I also find it interesting that the whole time I was watching Living Single, I never watched Friends, and we just
Hmm.
finding out about the whole Living Single Friends relationship
Hmm.
like a year ago.
Yeah.
So
Well, they've
I'm
been
not.
no,
I'm
they've been
really.
doing
I was
interviews
always
on it.
dubious about that. Like
It's been that's
there was a
been
ton of
knowledge.
shows
They've
on
been
TV.
reporting on that.
No, that's like a year and a half old, like two
No,
years
it's
old.
no,
It's
it's
been a
not.
big thing like 2 years
No,
ago.
they
Nobody was
no.
talking about this in the 1990s
The
when they
young
were
lady
both
that
on the
played
air.
Maxine, she been did an interview. This was years ago. She did an interview. The guy
She
who
did an
played
interview where she talked about the marketing that the two shows got and the difference between them. She was not
no,
claiming that it was a ripoff of her show.
that was an interview she did on the
The
Breakfast
original.
Club a couple years ago. But she was one of the first ones that came out and said the difference. Her Kim Fields and a guy who made who played her love interest in it. He was the original one that came out and did an interview because he was
Mhm.
actually fired from the show. But
And
she
he was
came out and
fired for
told the actual
criticizing them
story of
over
it.
the budgets that they were getting for marketing and production.
Right.
Not for saying, "Oh, this is the same show." Like, of
Well,
course, it's
no,
a
you
white
have to.
company
I don't understand.
investing their
I don't
dollars
understand
into
the
their
defense
own,
of it. I
and
don't
that's
understand the defense of it. But that is something that didn't just come out on the Breakfast Club. That was a story that had been put out there by the two of them. Both or all three of them told a
it didn't
similar
become a
story.
part of our cultural conversation until like 2 years ago, and it
A
morphed.
part of
I
your
lit
cultural
the
conversations. But
my cultural
I watch
conversation.
podcasts for a living. So I've heard them do interviews on lesser known platforms. They've been telling that story. It reached your ears maybe a year and a half ago, but that interview isn't even it's older than a year and a half old.
But how does that equate? But here's my problem. How did the story morph from the company? They're both under the same parent company, and
Mm-hmm.
one show is getting more in budget and production than the other, into them stealing the idea for the show. When
The
there's like
how they
literally at the
how the
time,
because
there's
the
like
concept,
there's like hold on. At the time, there's
but you
like
don't
20
see
shows
how that
across
could
the
be the
different
same
network
story.
television. But I could say that about Martin. I could say that about Frasier. I could say that about all the shows that were on TV at that time about a group of friends
Yeah, but
in
if they're under the
situational
same,
comedies,
but
yo.
those were other networks, and of course a network is going to see a show on that side and say, "Hey, let's do that over here." But if your
Well,
show
I
is
don't
under
think
the
that I don't.
that
But
show was
but
under
here,
the same network, they were
so
produced by the
was,
same
if I
people.
remember correctly, so was Roseanne and Martin, and yet Roseanne show was definitely better produced as far as like money wise.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could
Because it
definitely
was a
tell
black
that like
show.
that's not anything different from. What I'm trying to figure out is
The
how does
issue,
that
the
equate
issue,
to
but it
your
wasn't.
argument that
But the issue
Friends.
wasn't. But the argument comes from the actual participants stating what was happening and what had happened.
So
Many
here's
people
what I'm
didn't
saying though.
understand
What they
that that show
initially
came a
stated
whole
what
almost two
happened.
years before Friends came
What
out.
they
And when they
initially
gave the
stated what
same
happened,
concept,
Nate, was not that Friends was stealing their show. What
that was part of the
their
argument.
only issue was that
That
our
was
show
part
would be
of the
way more
argument.
popular if y'all gave us the marketing and production budgets
But it
that you
was
give it to the
it was
white
part
folks.
of the same argument. I don't get the defense of it, but it was the same argument. That was part of the same argument. They were out longer than they were. Living
Mm-hmm.
Single ratings were better than theirs were. They were getting paid less than they were. They were on two different, like they were on a back lot and they were on a better lot than them after being out over almost 2 years before they were. So
Yeah, so
the
like no,
concept of the
I
show
know the
was
story of like
stolen.
what
The
the
name of the
issues
show,
was.
they took one of the names that was supposed to be for that show and named it after this one. Now, could they legally do that? Yeah, because it was their company. But the concept remains the same. A lot of the work that we've done always gets usurped and put into a different platform. We saw that in that first was made popular in the music industry, where they would take something that we did and rebrand it and make it into something brand new. That's an infamous story throughout the music history, of black music history. That's always been done, especially in the 50s, 60s, and 40s. Like that's something that's always been done. But we don't talk about it because many of them didn't talk
it
about it.
wasn't really much to talk about. Like when they were doing that, like it wasn't like they was making these big pop records. They wasn't doing no numbers.
But they were doing
Always been
numbers.
more popular, Nate.
Yeah, but your argument makes no sense because it did make a difference. It made a big
Difference did
difference
it
because
make? What difference did it make?
if you had more money to market this show as Friends did, your show will always get marketed to
No,
more
no, no.
people. Will be a more
I'm
market.
not arguing about the fact that what they did to Friends, what they did to Living Single was effed up
Hmm.
over like, and the fact that they did it for that bland ass show Friends is terrible.
Right.
But we're talking about remakes and reimaginings, and to say that Friends like the where this story
You don't
morphs,
understand. You
and I
don't see
watched
how
it.
it was
I
a
watched it
remake.
morph into, oh, they stole the idea for Friends from Living Single. No, they didn't.
It
They
wasn't.
just gave it a bigger.
No, it
They
was.
gave it
That's.
more budget, and
I,
they
I
gave
don't.
it more
I don't. I
attention
really don't
because they were white.
understand. But I don't understand how. I don't understand the concept of you defending it when that's actually what the artists that worked on that show said. They said it out their own mouth. They were there at the creative table, so they understood what was going on. They created a
I
whole
okay.
new show based off of a show that they had. Did they put it in the same city? Yeah. Did they make it about a group of friends? Yeah. It was the same
There's
concept
like
that they
nine, yo.
made.
There's like literally like 20 shows on the air about a group of friends in
Yeah,
a
but they're
city living
on. They're
together.
not on the same. They're not on the same network. They're not on this marketing it on the same network.
Y'all
The
be doing a
network
lot of
took the
reaching.
concept of living single and created an all-white show off of it. Did they make it more contemporary? Probably so, but they owned both of the shows. It wasn't like two separate networks that took the idea of something somebody was doing across the street. They took the
Mm-hmm.
same idea that they had on the first floor as they had on the second floor, and they just took the idea and made a show and put more money into it. That's exactly what happened. It's the
Yeah,
same
except that there
story,
were like 50 shows on the air that all were
but they
doing the
were
same
not on
thing.
the same network though.
Like I
That was
like
the
the
whole
story
point
of
of it.
white people putting money behind other white people
It's
so
for me.
white people can win.
It's not
Like
about white
it's a
or
very
black to me.
flimsy argument to say that Friends and like first of all, like Living Single was better than Friends on every level. And the only people who like Friends
And that's
for the
what
most
their
part was
that's
just
what
white
their
folk.
main the actors that was in it, that was their main argument. They knew their ratings were better than them. Their ratings were better. So they had higher ratings, yet they were still getting less money. Their show was costing less money because they were getting paid less money. They had bigger stars on Living Single than they had on Friends.
Mm-hmm.
Most of us didn't know who most of those people were. But we knew who Tootie was. We knew who Sinclair James was. We knew a little bit about Maxine Shaw. We knew those characters from other shows. I think the two male actors were the ones that we really didn't know that well, but for the most part, they took the concept. It wasn't my issue was, and based off of what I've read and heard from them, it was the fact that they were on the same network. How do you start a whole show using the name that you were going to give to us that you actually decided against giving to us, and then you give this to this white show and you build the show based off the same premise that you built our show around?
Mm-hmm.
Like that was the, and then they put them in the same city. Like that, it just that's my issue overall. But there are a lot of things that, in terms of making remakes that I don't agree with, especially within our, when it becomes a remake of something we've done. And I've seen a lot of that happen recently with a lot of our programming. they remake it and just put a different face in it, and that's their plan to do it. But when it's something that is more so an adaptation of something or a reboot, I don't have an issue with that because typically that's done with the characters in mind, with the storyline in mind. When you remake something, it's just I want to take that and it's just about the business, and that's just not the type of artist that I am. It has to make sense creatively
Mm-hmm.
before just or simply not just financially. If it's just a financial change, that means you're paying those actors less. You're trying to kick out the same content, and there's no difference. There's no nuance in this. It's the same story. It's not really. It's not worth anything. Has it worked before? I'm sure it has. But most of the things that I've seen that I didn't like that it was a
Mm-hmm.
remake, it was for that reason. It was I didn't like Dreamgirls, and that was an all black cast. I didn't like it. It just didn't have the same rhythm. And I saw the original, not the original, but I saw it on Broadway first, and it just didn't have the
Mm-hmm.
same. It didn't have the same drive to me. But I guess that's our show. You want to close this out, sir?
Yeah, Nate changed the whole topic of the conversation, but I'm gonna let him have it tonight. We might have to come back with a
I
part two because
followed
I'm
your
I'm
lead, sir.
interested. I'm interested to know. We started off talking about remakes, and this man went into ripoffs. So I
Oh,
think
you
we need
put
to talk
hacks.
about ripoffs.
That was a
Maybe we
part of
should
your
talk about
topic,
ripoffs.
wasn't it? Let me put his topic back up there because maybe he forgot
It
his topic.
wasn't.
I'm gonna close out with
No, I
his
don't
topic up
know
there.
if I don't know if we I don't know if we were talking about ripoffs.
Your topic was remakes, reboots, reimaginings, healthy homage, or
Or
ill
ill
created
creative
hacks.
hacks. So you're saying they all help. You're saying that they're all ill creative hacks, is what you're saying.
The remakes are, and the
Okay.
quote unquote reimaginings,
Okay.
but definitely the remakes. That's how I took it. So
Mm-hmm.
I've been consistent in how I feel about remakes from the very beginning of this podcast. I don't like them.
Mm.
You know, I'm not a flip flopper, but it's cool. But go ahead, take us out of here, sir.
This has been Binge Worthy Podcast. We'll be back next week. What we talking about next week?
That's a good question.
I think we need to continue this conversation now that you done brought thievery into it.
We can. I mean, we can.
I think we need to have a. I think we need to have a real conversation about friends and living single and
Okay,
how often this happens.
okay. So that means we're
Mhm.
gonna be doing our friends and living single research, and I don't mind. I don't mind it at
I
all.
don't mind neither. All I'm finding is blog posts from 2020 like 2019 and beyond.
Okay.
Mhm.
But it's
So
quite a few interviews. I'll try to find some of those interviews that I watch,
ah,
and I'll
okay.
send them
So I
over
think
to
we
you.
need to come back and I think we need to talk about how often does this really happen? Because you saying a
How
lot of
often
it.
does what happen?
This the reimagining, the ripoff. The ripoff.
Well,
Let's
the
call it what
ripoff
it is. They're
happens.
like the
I mean,
ripoff.
it
Like cause
does.
that
It
that's
happens,
the illegal connotation or like the immoral
but it
connotation
becomes
that
it becomes legal. It becomes legal
no.
thievery.
I know the difference between like legal on paper and then, but that's why I changed it to immoral,
Right.
right? Like, so I think we should talk about that. How often does that happen?
Hmm.
Like to our creatives, um, specifically, I think in film and television, because I think when you start talking, and we can talk about plays too. I just know that there's a point where like you have people who like are not able for whatever reason yet to like copyright everything the right way,
Right.
um, have the legal representation, and I think that's where things get really murky. But I know that if we talking about in the framework of like network television,
Hmm.
film, and Broadway theater,
Right.
um, yeah, I think
It
that's
becomes a,
that's the
it
thing.
becomes more like you said, more of a moral issue because how
So
much of
yeah, let's talk
it
about
should
it in
you do
terms of a
that?
moral issue because
Right.
I think we touched on that at the back end of this conversation,
But
but I
there,
think
there are legal ramifications when a person has done their due diligence, and I'm gonna bring on. He probably won't come, but I'll bring on the person that is involved in that. But there
mhm,
becomes legal aspect that you can legally, if I wrote this, I can legally attach it to it because trademarking and
mhm,
registering of ideas and products and services can have a open window to what you can sue for when someone takes your idea. But we see that in all over. But that's a good
yeah.
concept. So I have
All right.
a guest in mind that we can bring on. But
So we're gonna talk about this. We're gonna continue this part two of this conversation next week,
we
and we're
are
gonna
we
talk
are
specifically about ripoffs,
ripoffs, bastards.
ripping off black art.
So there we go. That's the title: ripping off black art.
All right.
So this has been the Artist Exchange. No, I'm supposed to say the Artist Exchange. The Binge Worthy Podcast Series, Season 3, Episode 2. Stay looking out for us every Tuesday around 3 p.m., depending on how YouTube
How we
treats
feeling?
it. All right, peace out. Don't, well, you
Peace
know,
out, y'all.
share it, like it, subscribe, all that jazz.
Deuces.